It's time for some more experimental typography. So my idea for today is to take a long exposure photo of me drawing a letter. I'll do that for a couple different letters so I can make a word together, and then we'll make a poster design using those letters. Now, I've never done any sort of long exposure photography in my life, so that on its own is already kind of a new thing for me, let alone doing a long exposure trying to make letter forms out of them. So really, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get anything decent out of these long exposure photographs. But we're here to find out if there is something that we can do and then figure out if we can make something cool with it. So let's get to it. All right, so I've got both of my cameras set up here. I'm trying to record as well as take my photographs, so I'm trying to do it separately. So that way I can capture the entire thing and I don't have to run back, click the photo and record. I can do it all at once. I don't know how well that's gonna happen, so we'll see what happens. But I have this light. I figured it might be a little bit more interesting since it's longer, so that way the letter forms are actually gonna be kind of thicker rather than having to go back multiple times. I really don't know how this is all gonna turn out. Like I said, I've never done long exposure, so this is all new to me. I'm learning this as I go, and we're just gonna see what happens. I also don't know if it's gonna be dark enough to take the photographs. Right now I'm doing it during the day. I have all my curtains and blinds all shut, so hopefully it's dark enough, but I really don't know if it will be, so we'll find out. If I have to wait until tonight to take the photographs, I will, but I really don't want to have to wait a whole lot of time, so hopefully this is good enough. So let's give it a shot. All right, so I just tried it once and it didn't take anything that I did, so I guess I have to try to expose it for longer? I don't know. Alrighty, so we're getting somewhere. So the photo I just took looks like this, which tells me that I'm on the right track because we're definitely getting somewhere, but I think it went a little bit longer than I expected, and whenever I was just kind of messing around and I just kind of threw the light everywhere, it actually captured that as well. So I think I have to make it a little bit shorter so that way I don't have to do it quite as long. But so far, we're getting somewhere. Also, I'm gonna have to figure out the best way to remove the background from the photographs. Because this light is so bright and I'm so close to the wall, it's still capturing all of the light. So it's not just like, a black background. There's not really a whole lot I can do about that, but I'm thinking since the light is so bright that it won't really matter. I can just add contrast and reduce the shadows and everything, and it won't really matter how bright the background is because it's going to be nothing compared to this light. So I'll have to figure that out, but that's what I'm thinking. All right, so that one looked like this. So we're definitely getting somewhere. We're definitely making some progress. The one thing that I don't really love about them is that it's just so full and thick. I don't know if that's because of how long I'm exposing or the light that I'm using. So what I might do is I might do all the letters that I'm gonna do with this light and then go back and do it with a different light that's kind of thinner, so that way I can see if maybe I can get a different look, almost like a scribbled kind of look. I don't really know. I'm just kind of trying things out at this point. I don't really know. But anyways, let's continue on. So I went ahead and I did all of the letters that I was going to do using this light. So now I can try it with the other light and we'll see what happens. Alrighty, so I'm going to be using this light, which is much thinner and smaller, probably less bright. So I'm thinking that I'll have to do every letter a couple different times, just to actually make the letter form seem a little bit thicker and not so thin. But I think it'll make it look a little bit different, a little bit more kind of scribbly. So that might be a cool effect, so let's try and see what happens. All right, so I just did a test, and this is what it looks like. And as I predicted, it looks a lot more scribbly, which might be something that we want to try out, maybe not, but at least we'll have it. So I'm gonna do this with the other letters, and then we can jump into Photoshop. All right, so I went through and I took a couple different variations of each letter, which I just did L-I-G-H-T for light. So I think we're pretty good to go as far as photographs go. So now it's just time to jump into Photoshop and get designing. So the first thing I did was slightly edit all of the photographs so that way you could actually see what the letters were, and then I just set them to screen so that way I could get rid of the black background. After that, I started experimenting with some ideas. I found this photo of this woman dancing with this long exposure effect, and I thought it looked pretty cool. I thought I might be able to do something with it, so I just figured I would start here. I did have to go back and make some slight adjustments to some of the letters, but really nothing crazy. At this point, I'm really just trying to get a general layout for how I want everything to look and where I want it to be. I really don't have a solid idea that I'm going for. I'm just kind of trying some things out, throwing some things into the filter gallery, and just kind of seeing what I can come up with. I eventually got that idea to a place that I thought was good, but I wanted to try some other things out. So I just threw it into its own group so that way I could start on another idea and see if I liked that one better. So I really just started dropping in some of the photos that I had found that I liked and just seeing what I could come up with and trying to play around with the photography as well as the type to come out with an interesting composition. I even tried out some of the different variations of the type that I had to see if maybe I could get some different ideas or some different inspiration. And really this is where I spent a lot of my time on this project. I just couldn't get the type and the photography to really feel cohesive rather than just here's the photograph and then here's the type that just so happens to be on top. And so it just felt like everything was separate, and I just didn't really like that. It just didn't really feel correct to me. I think the reason for that is because I typically like to work with a sans serif typeface, but in this scenario, the type that I'm using kind of looks more like a decorative font, which is cool and it works in its own way, but I'm not really used to it, so I don't really know the best way and the best practices to use this type to make it look and feel like it's a part of the poster that I'm working on. So really, I just feel like I'm completely out of my zone here, and I'm just kind of throwing whatever I can think of at the wall to see if I can get it to work. But after working on it for a while, I got to a point where I just felt like I was in too deep into one project, and so I was like, let me just create an entirely new document, start from scratch, and see if maybe I can find something else to do. So that's what I started doing here, seeing if maybe it would make more sense to do it inverted, so rather than a black background, a white background, and see if maybe that would have some different results. Although as you can kind of see here, it really hasn't changed that much. The ideas and the problems that I was encountering earlier are still here. Now the colors are inverted, so not much has changed. After a while, I thought maybe what I need to do is I really just need to experiment with the type a little bit more, maybe add some distortion to it, some effects. I thought that might be able to maybe bring it to a state that I'm more familiar with or feel more comfortable with, but it didn't really work out that well. So at this point, I'm just kind of trying whatever. There's not really a thought process. I'm just doing whatever I know that I can do and just seeing if something will stick. And unfortunately, that's not really a whole lot. So at this point, I just had to take a break. I was probably working on this for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, something like that. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. I was just getting frustrated and generally just feeling like I'm not really good at what I'm doing. But after a few hours and trying to get into a different headspace, I came back to the project. So after everything that I had already tried, I thought maybe if I got some different photographs, I might be able to come up with something different. So I went back to some of the sites that I used to find photography, and then I brought those in and started to experiment again. But unfortunately, I still kept running into a lot of the same problems that I had earlier, which is I just don't really know how to work with this kind of type. And so I just kind of had to spend a lot of time just kind of experimenting, trying things, and just hoping that something will click eventually. I do think that taking the type through the filter gallery like I did actually did end up helping me in a way, because since I'm used to working with fonts and they tend to look very vectorized and clean and crisp, I think that kind of helped flatten out the image and kind of give it a more vectorized look than originally when it had to kind of glow and kind of fade off. So eventually I landed on this image that I liked. I thought the type at least looked okay with it. And then I just started overlaying some more long exposure photographs that I had found, which I do think helped bring everything together. So that way it wasn't just an image above and then type below. It just kind of helped lock everything together. And then I went back to the very first idea that I finished and kind of did the same thing, just adding in some different overlays to kind of lock everything together and hopefully make it feel a little bit more cohesive throughout. But really after that, it was just adding some subtle textures and things, and that was pretty much it. And here are the final results. Out of the two, I think I preferred the second one, but I do think the first one is all right. I like that it has a certain motion to it. The overlays that I use just so happen to have this kind of curling motion that kind of align with the dancer, and so it kind of fits together really well in a way that I didn't really intend for it. But with how much I struggled on this project, honestly, I'll take any win I can get. Now, I think I prefer the second one just because it's a lot more chaotic and bombastic, and it doesn't really have to make as much sense, and just kind of has an unsettling feeling to it, which isn't something I was necessarily intending to go for, but I do think it kind of matches with how the type looks, kind of like almost like scribbled and grungy, and so it almost has like this like horror movie poster kind of look, which is honestly probably the best thing that I can say about these posters. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm really not super stoked on how these came out. I think given the amount of trouble that I had with these posters and the amount of time that I put in, I do think they came out all right, but it's really not something that I'm super proud of. I think out of all the designs that I've made throughout this series, I think these are probably the weakest ones that I've made. But like usual, I can say that without experimenting with type in this way, I would have never come up with these designs. So even though I'm not super ecstatic with the way that the designs came out in the end, I can say that it pushed me to try out some new things and to do things a little bit differently than I might normally do. So thinking about it from that perspective seems less like a failure and more of just like an experiment that I had to do in order to get better. But let me know what you guys think about these designs. Am I just being a little bit too critical? Are they really that bad? Would you have done something differently? Leave a comment and let me know. But if you found this video entertaining or helpful in any way, I would appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.